Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 98 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Colton, and I'm joined today by the awesome Spencer Howland. How's it going today, Spencer?
Good. I'm excited to be here, man. I'm excited to get a fill in this week. So should we talk quickly about why I'm filling in? Because people who might not know at home.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that, huh?
Yeah. So I'll actually let you kind of start that.
So, well, we were talking with my co-host Jared, and due to this whole crisis we've been having with the coronavirus, he let me know that he's just really too swamped with work. He does a lot of IT work at home, and he's been just really too busy to deal with this, which is totally understandable.
Right.
So he asked that, it's not really his the biggest priority right now with everything going on. So Spencer happily filled in for him this week.
Yeah, and we are gonna find an awesome new host. We're talking to somebody tonight. So the podcast will continue, and Colton will still be on the show every week, and we're really excited about the future. And just thank you to Jared for what he did when he was here.
Yeah, I was super grateful to Jared for just showing me the ropes of how to podcast and coordinating with me and all this sort of stuff. It was really great opportunity to work with Jared. He's a super cool dude.
Yeah, so we're really grateful to him, and yeah, but we'll keep the show must go on, Colton. The show must go on.
Show must always go on. And so before we get too far in this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you would like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel. And with that out of the way, let's get on to the podcast.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So a couple weeks ago, as many of you know, they did have a Pauper cube up on MTGO. Pauper cube is one of my favorite cubes, but unfortunately, the week it was up, I was gone most of the time to San Diego. My brother got married down there, so I didn't get to play any of it, unfortunately. Did you have any experiences, Spencer?
I'm not the biggest fan of Limited on MTGO now that Arena exists, so I don't go and cube draft on MTGO. So unfortunately, I did not get to play any Pauper cube, but I do like myself a good Pauper cube or a good Peasant cube.
Yeah, Pauper cubes are really good. I actually had a guy over here that had one built for one of the stores around here, but we got to draft it probably like 4 or 5 times, and it was really fun. But unfortunately, he took a different opportunity and had to take the cube with him. But Pauper cube is a really good time, and if you guys ever get to draft it, I highly suggest doing so.
Yeah, I think Pauper cubes are a nice change of pace as well as like they get to be really powerful, but not like to the insane power level as other stuff, and it's really fun.
Yeah, you're not doing the same crazy things like you would in, say, the Legacy or Vintage cube, obviously, because you don't have things like power or planeswalkers or anything like that, or really broken storm cards. But you're playing more of a different grindy value game, and it's really interesting to see cards that normally are not. It would be considered as strong in other environments, just be complete all-stars in the Pauper cube.
Right.
So, another thing I wanted to cover this week is, as many of you know, because of the current crisis, most, if not all LGSs are pretty much closed at this point, and all paper Magic has been suspended for a while. But that doesn't mean that there is not Magic to be had and Pauper events to be had. Wizards, as many of you may know, has announced the new super qualifiers that they've been talking about that do qualify people in order to make it up to the Players Tour. There's a certain route to get up there. And they've also added some more premier level events for Pauper and for other formats as well. But of course, I wanted to just briefly touch on the ones that will be available for Pauper over the next week or so. On April 7th at 3 a.m. Pacific time, there is a Pauper Super Qualifier and the Pauper Showcase, probably one of the biggest MTGO Pauper events, will be Sunday, April 12th at 10 a.m. Pacific time.
Nice. Yeah, I plan on streaming some of the Pauper challenges here in the next couple months. So I know that you also plan on streaming some of those events whenever you get the chance, Colton. So
Yeah, I'm gonna try to start streaming weekly next week, guys. Still working on getting everything set up and put together, but I should start streaming. Maybe some. I'm still semi new to learning how MTGO works. I'm still trying to get all the cards needed for all the different decks, but I should be able to start doing at least some tournament practice, maybe some leagues starting next week.
awesome. Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. And yeah, I'm excited to stream a little bit more Pauper myself. So and
Yeah, it's a good time.
you can check that out at twitch.tv/easygamemedia.
And for the Common Knowledge podcast from myself, I'll be on CK Podcast on twitch.tv.
Yeah, it's gonna be sweet, man. I'm excited for you.
Thanks.
And we'll make sure that you have all the cards. You'll have all the cards to stream Pauper. Don't worry.
Yeah. I know how to get them now. It's just getting all the list of cards that I need and putting them all into the selector and purchasing them all. Just knowing what everything that I need and going through all the cards that we have.
It's true. It's a tough one. One thing that I would recommend for people who are in a similar thing where you're like trying to figure out kind of stuff that you need. One of the really sweet things to do is actually just to go in and put in all the decks that you want to play, and then just make the lists from the cards that you don't have.
Yeah. And I know that one of the great places to do that, to just find lists, is MTG Goldfish. Is a really good importing tool for that.
Yep.
I've recently started doing that just last week, and it's really been a big help to me. I rewatched Saffron Olive. For all of you that haven't tried MTGO, just made another video on how to get started on MTGO. It's about an hour long, and he goes into really great detail about how to get into it and how to import deck lists and stuff like that. And it was a really big help for me to find everything that I needed to be able to play more decks on MTGO.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about a deck, right?
I think this is one of your favorite decks, isn't it? Isn't it, Spencer?
Yeah, it was when I played a lot of Pauper. I played an old list today, and I did some research on some of the new lists, and man, did this deck hit some toys.
Yeah, this is why I want to talk about this deck, because it did get a lot of new upgrades, especially with Theros Beyond Death.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about mono white, and I'll put a link in the show notes, kind of so people can kind of follow along. At home, I'll put some Goldfish links to the list that I'll be reading off right now. But I can read it off really quickly if you want.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so the list that I'm looking at, it went 5-1 on the Pauper Royale by at Cards Realm. There we go. Cardsrealm.com. It was 4 Deathblade Elite, 4 Laguna Band Trailblazer, 4 Akron Skyguard, 2 Seeker of the Way, 3 Emerged Unscathed, 4 Karametra's Blessings, that's one we'll get to talk about, 4 Mutagenic Growth, 4 Cartouche of Solidarity, 4 Ethereal Armor, 4 Hyena Umbra, 1 Lifelink, 3 Sentinel's Eyes, and 2 Chamano's Blessing.
Yep. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this list is Spencer was saying there's 7 new cards just from the most recent set in this deck, and that's pretty unusual for a Pauper deck.
Yeah, this deck has, quite a few new cards just comparatively. If you think about it, Sentinel's Eyes and Karametra's Blessing. Karametra's Blessing, it does something really interesting for this deck in that it saves your creatures without it being a protection spell. So. Yeah. What that means is it gives you a little bit more reach in this deck, which this deck can actually suffer from. Which when I saw this in the new list, I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. And then I saw Sentinel's Eyes, and I was like, holy crap!
Yeah, they're just value city.
Yeah, Sentinel's Eyes does something that this deck also has a problem with, which is it kind of has a problem where it falls behind. This, and once you have something like Sentinel's Eyes, you actually play a little bit more creatures, right? Because one of the biggest problems that this deck typically has is they kill one of your creatures, and then all of a sudden you don't have anything to be doing.
No, it has what I like to call the Bogles problem.
Exactly. It does have that Bogles problem, and that's a pretty big help.
Yeah, it really is. I've been playing against more and more of these lists lately. I've been playing a lot of blue black, the old blue black teachings decks, just because that's one of my favorite decks to play. Just kind of play around on MTGO, and playing against some of the old lists, it's just a walk in the park with a lot of these decks. You just edict them a couple times, they just kind of
Right.
died and not having anything. But then being able to play now up to 14 to sometimes even 16
Yeah,
creatures.
someone played cat to
Yeah,
to get up to 16 creatures.
yeah, just being able to play up to 16 creatures and have the Sentinel's Eyes that can just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. Oh, it's so much harder to beat that deck now.
Yeah, I agree.
I also really the other thing I really like about this deck is I feel like it's a really really good choice um, for people who are just trying to get into the format too. Um, it's a really good starting point for a lot of people, not only because the sticker price of this deck is ridiculously cheap. I mean, there are lists floating around in on that are moto tickets between about maybe 10 and 15 ticks, and then the paper price on these decks is usually between about 17 to $25, which is super super cheap. But they're also pretty, in my experience, they're pretty easy and straightforward to learn how to play. They don't take a billion matches to learn how. It doesn't take a million matches to learn how to play this deck, but it's also a very very rewarding deck to play, especially once you learn all the little nuances of when to like try to save your creature, or just to try to get push those last points of damage, or to try to even use some of your spells as essentially as removal against opponents' creatures.
Yeah, actually, a really, really interesting play came up today when I was playing this deck that I just didn't even think about just because I was like trying to refresh myself kind of on Pauper, and I was playing against Mono Blue, and post board my opponent cast a Piracy Charm against my a Crone Skyguard, and I let
Mm-hmm.
it die. And right when I clicked OK, I was like, wait a second, I have Mutagen Growth in my hand.
Yeah,
This card's
Mutagen
just a
Growth is a
straight
blowout.
up counter spell that also gives my creature a 1/1 counter. So this deck has more play to it than I think a lot of people think. They kind of just think of it as kind of like a derpy, dirtily deck. But I think the games that you win, you have to play pretty well.
Yeah, you do have to play pretty well. I'm not going to deny that. I think it's also just like it's a good easy concept for people to kind of
Yeah, it
grasp.
is. It really
You
is.
play you play dudes, you make them big, you swing at face. It's a really really hard thing to master, but it's a really easy thing to learn how to do.
Yeah, this deck's gotten quite a few upgrades like in the last couple of years. If you think about like Seeker of the Way, getting downshifted to common,
Oh, that
you have
card is such a blowout.
you have Cartouche of Solidarity coming in as a new card that this deck got to play once it really made that like Ethereal Armor Hyena Umbra combination. Now you have Vigilance and First Strike a lot of the times with this deck. It really has all kind of come together into I think Emergent State that even got downgraded, right? Because that was an uncommon in its original release in Rise of Eldrazi. So this deck really has gotten a lot over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it really has, and it's just gotten one. It was one of those decks that was kind of, I felt like was kind of on the fringes for a long time, and like maybe tier 2 or tier 3 category was as something that people would play and you could win with, but was kind of just seen as it's just the mono white deck that dies to an edict. But
Yeah.
now it's gotten all these upgrades, and now it's putting up really really good consistent finishes and every week.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that this deck has started to do a little bit better, especially recently, is it has a really, really good burn matchup, and it has a really, really good
Oh.
scred matchup. So it's really good against both of those decks, and both of those decks right now are two of the top. I mean, two of the top 5, 10 decks.
Yeah, every time I played burn against this deck, it's been really really rough. You kind of have to you don't win in your typical burn fashion usually against this deck. You usually play the game but try to get them when they're when either they stumble or they misplay pretty much. But a really good mono white player is usually not going to lose to a burn player.
Yeah, I think that depending on the context of some of the teamer that the affinity decks also can really depend on where this deck can sit in the metagame because I think if they're playing the version I think there was the all-in versions were becoming more popular a couple weeks ago. Um, and like just the all-in Atog versions. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that this deck is probably a little bit better against that deck than maybe some of the more like value-driven uh, affinity decks as well.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Affinity, and I found that because I've seen a lot of decks that are either a 1-1 split of Teamer Battle Rage and Fling, or they're a 2-1 two Fling, one Teamer Battle Rage, and two Teamer Battle Rage and one Fling. And the versions I've been playing that have the two Teamer Battle Rage and one Fling, I found tend to get more easily blown out than the two Fling, one Teamer Battle Rage,
It's true,
just because the deck interacts very very well during the battle phase.
right? Yeah, I think that Mono White has game against a lot of the top decks right now, and I think
Hmm.
that's why I wonder. I would be interested to see what the data said. Right now, it's sitting at 5.38% of the metagame on Goldfish, which is right along with. I mean, that's where Scred Fairies is, where Boros Aggro is. I mean, it's above things like I know a few weeks back. If we just look at challenge results, wasn't Boros Monarch really doing really well?
Yeah, Boros and Mardu Monarch have both been both were putting in a lot of work a couple weeks ago. They kind of fell a little bit, and Burn has kind of come up a little bit, and people have refigured out how to retool Affinity. They've been adding different creatures and different kind of 4 and 5 card packages to try to fight the meta a little bit better. But Mono White's kind of just been sitting in between about 4 and 5.5% of the meta for probably a good month or so now.
Yeah, it's awesome to see one of my favorite decks kind of picking up the pace, and I think the Burn doing well has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think so too, because for a while Tron was just everywhere, just making people miserable. And the natural counter to Tron is Burn, because Burn does not care about the Stonehorn Dignitary lock at all. It's like, okay, you make me stop to my battle phase, you're still cursed and you're still losing at least one life every turn. You can just keep locking me out of the game, you're still taking 1 damage every turn, you're still gonna
Right,
die before I deck out.
right.
So, and then, of course, a good counter to any sort of red deck is a white deck that is aggressive but can also gain some life so that Burn can't race you.
Right. And it's also just really, really hard to kill a Laguna Band Trailblazer. Like,
Oh my
the thing
gosh!
just gets so big, Burn's just like, oh, you just can't kill this.
No, they just kind of like, oh, okay.
It's an interesting race because it snowballs for one deck, and you're like, rubbing your hands together for the other. And if they draw a Secret of the Way, the game's just over.
Oh, Secret of the Way is such a good card against Burn. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
So that was our deck of the week. Spencer, I know, was telling us a little bit about his match against Mono Blue. Did you want to go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, it was. There were some interesting things that kind of came out of that match. That kind of speak to why some of the upcoming changes are like some of the changes are really important for the deck. If you look at something like Sentinel's Eyes as something that can kind of give you reoccurring things that once things go awry for you is really important in a matchup like that. Having something like this, when you think about something like Spellstutter Sprite, for example, I think
Ooh,
makes a lot of sense in that, okay, well, you can counter this, but I'm just going to get the Sentinel's Eyes back. And once you've already had, and it's also important that these decks are now playing 8 1-drops.
yeah.
To also try and get around those type of things. And the thing that Mono Blue is doing, kind of differently, I feel, than it was doing in the past, is, it's the deck's engine has always been like Ninja of the Deep Hours plus Spellsters, right, plus Fairy Miscreant, right?
Yep.
But with the addition of Mystic Sanctuary, Tragic Lessons has been a very interesting addition to this deck over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, the deck, it feels like to me, has taken less of an aggressive slant and more of a. It can be a little bit more of a controlling mono blue deck rather than just try to kill you while still having a bunch of counter spells to protect the ninja in hand.
Yeah, and that misplay that I talked about earlier is really what I wanted to cover. So what happened is I didn't save my creature, right, with
Mhm.
that mutagenic growth, and then I ended up having to play my second Crowan Skyguard, which got coral netted. And had I just had the other one in play, it wouldn't have mattered, and I wouldn't have lost all of this value to this coral net, and I still almost won, and I would have just blown my opponent out of the water with that play. But it was interesting to me just how many cards they had for the matchup between Piracy Charm and Coral Net and Echoing Truth. They just kind of had a lot of things to interact, and that's something that I don't think people expect out of a mono blue deck, and I certainly wasn't
No.
expecting the Piracy Charms. So
Yeah, the biggest complaint, and I've echoed this multiple times about the mono blue deck for a long time, is that the mono blue deck often just for so long has just had issues with once something hits the table, it can't get rid of it.
right.
And now that they're finding more ways to not only keep stuff off the table because of Mystic Sanctuary being able to get back your if you're some people are playing, I saw some guy was playing against a bunch of Vapor Snags against me, or just being able to Coral Net something, and that making your opponent have a really bad choice, especially if you're playing the empty-handed aggro deck.
Right.
That the deck has had a lot more. It's become a lot more consistent and a lot more be able to get problem cards off the table for as long as it needs to. Doesn't have to get rid of them permanently, just as long as it needs to.
Right, and I think that, between main deck snaps and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to get a problematic thing out of the way and then just cast one of your counter spells between counterspell and deprive, and then you have all of these mystic sanctuaries to kind of add to that. What do you think of the addition of Mantle of Tides?
Mantle of Tides. What does that card do again?
Yeah, so it's 1 blue for an artifact equipment. It gives a creature +1/+2. And then whenever you draw a second card each turn, you can attach it to a creature you control for free.
Oh yes, this card. I've seen this card being played. I just didn't remember what it was. So I've had a pretty decent amount of mono blue opponents recently. I think this card is solidly okay.
Yeah.
But not as good as people think it is.
It does make your Delver of Secrets live against Lightning Bolt.
It does, but I've also found that it's pretty easy to kind of just kill Delver when they try to move it.
Sure.
There's a lot of instant speed interaction in this format. I don't think it's necessarily a bad card. I just think people don't really know how to use it properly, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And people, and I'm one of them, I just blow through like my cantrips a lot, like your preordains and stuff like that, and ponders, and those are really what you need to help kind of set it up, especially before you have ninja going.
Sure.
I think it's a card that can be really good, and a card that can also be misused and just kind of sit there on the battlefield and do nothing if
Sure.
you don't know how to use it properly.
Makes sense. One of the things that happened, the most interesting that's happened through my match though, were definitely just the pure amount of interactions that came out of the mono blue deck, and then also just the ability to just constantly be drawing cards with Tragic Legends plus Sanctuary.
Yeah, that's a really hard engine to stop.
Yeah, it was something that surprised me just how powerful it ended up being.
Mm-hmm. The only deck that I've played that was able to outvalue that was Blue Black Teachings. That I played a whole bunch of decks against that. I played Scred, I played other versions of Mono Blue, I played burn decks and Affinity, and none of those decks can even, once it gets to turn 5, 6, and 7, the Mono Blue deck can just start grinding out 2 cards a turn, 2 cards a turn, 2 cards a turn, 2 cards a turn. And over time, that gets really grinding. And like I said, the only deck that could really compete with that was Mystical Teachings, and that's because you're playing the Teachings plus the Forbidden Alchemies, and all the flashback is just free value.
Sure.
But yeah, the deck can generate a lot of value very quickly, and it can snowball really quickly into a really... it's not like a quick kill, but like a protected kill, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of my biggest takeaway from the match is just they have a lot of value engines, and also just kind of remember to not just be sad that your opponent is casting a card like Piracy Charm. Look at the cards in your hand, man. Come on, Spencer.
Yeah, Piracy Charm is a card people I think you need to watch out for a little more often, especially since Mono Blue is becoming a little bit bigger.
Yep.
So the next topic I kind of wanted to cover to go along with our mono white theme of the week is I wanted to try to talk a little bit about a sideboard card that people should be considering when they're building their Pauper decks. Last time with Jared, we were talking about red decks, so I did one that specifically was about damage and preventing damage. This time, I want to do something a little bit more about life gain. So I picked the Lone Missionary. So I think Lone Missionary, especially in this current format, is a really undervalued card. Um, just to read what it does real quick. Lone Missionary, it costs one generic and a white, and it's a 2/1 creature core monk. And when it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. And I really like this card against burn, especially because in a lot of ways it's a 2-for-1 against burn. And Pauper is all about trying to find your 2-for-1s. The reason why this card is a 2-for-1 is because it gains you 4 life, which costs them a card, and it can also block and kill one of their attackers, one of the Get to Love runners. So essentially, in the best case scenario, you're taking out 2 of their cards for one of your cards, and in the worst case scenario, you have a 2/1 that can attack them.
Yeah,
and it gives you 4 life.
Lone Missionary is one that, having an inexpensive way to gain life against the aggressive decks in this format, especially when you think about like the fact that people play Core Skyfisher in this format, and so when you combine that with Core Skyfisher, it kind of just gets out of control.
Yeah, this card, especially in Monarch, the two best places I've seen this card in have been either Monarch and those types of bounce based value decks, and Pestilence decks.
Yep, I think that both of those decks. When I was looking earlier today, I believe that there have been 3 decks in the last 2 days with Lone Missionary, and it was Jeskai Monarch or Jeskai Control with Core Skyfisher and my Black Cat Pestilence. So.
And I've also seen this pop up more and more out of Tron recently too, just because one of their main lands that isn't a Tron land is also white, so they can also play it as well. And Tron is notorious for having a terrible burn matchup. I mean, I played one against Tron this week with burn, and I just slapped a curse and just let them kill themselves. But just having a way to gain that life and prevent death against burn, and also sometimes if you're playing with or against the Pestilence deck, having more life, and when Pestilence is a thing that you're worried about, having more life than your opponent is a really big deal.
I agree.
Because a lot of the Pestilence decks, they just beat you by just slowly eating away both players' life totals, and if you have a lower life total than them, well, you just lose. But if you have a higher life total than them, then you can have a chance to either it kills your board, sure, but the Pestilence dies, or the Pestilence just doesn't do anything, and you're just able to kill them through a Pestilence.
Right. I think
yeah.
It makes a lot of sense for both those decks. Pestilence, being an even effect just makes this card a lot more valuable in your deck.
Yeah, it really does. I've seen it played in the Pestilence deck and been killed by. I've seen it played against the Pestilence deck and have it beat the Pestilence deck just because of the fact that you have 4 more life than your opponent. So watch out for this card if you have them. If you play a white deck, I suggest if you can play white, play at least 2 Lone Missionaries, what I would say, especially in the current meta.
There you go.
So the next section, usually I would be talking about different draft chaff to look for.
Hey man, don't think we're doing paper drafts right now.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Don't be going over to folks' houses and doing paper drafts. If you do draft on Magic Online, there's still some cards you can look for, especially since Modern Horizons just released. There's a whole bunch in there that are really good. Ephemerate. There's a whole list I could give, but as far as paper drafts, don't be doing that, folks. Please don't. Just stay home, stay safe. That's my draft chaff message of the week.
It's a good one.
So, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add, Spencer?
No, I would say if you're looking to get into Pauper, Mono White is a great place to do it. It has, you're one of the most popular decks in Pauper is always going to be Burn, and having a good matchup against that deck just out of the gates is just kind of a great way to start playing.
Yeah, it really is, because a lot of people just not learn. A lot of people love mono red, or that's just they just start to get into, because a lot of people start with mono red, and just having a good matchup against one of the top decks is always good.
Yep, I agree. Yeah. Anything from you?
Nope. I think that does it for me this week. So, this will do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find Spencer on Twitter at Spencer13H, or me at @SnutBrawl on Twitter, or feel free to email us at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you have any questions about the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else like that, please email us. Our email box has been kind of dead in the past couple weeks, and I'd love to see some questions from the audience. And also, please feel free to comment below if you have any questions or comments for us. And you can also find us. You can also, and thanks again to puremtgo.com and for the Constructive Criticism Network.
Don't forget to check out the Patreon at patreon.com/commonknowledge.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye. Stay safe. Don't touch your face.